This is Neil.
And this is Laura. Welcome to MedSearch Moments, the AMSN podcast.
This podcast is an engaging look at the lives of and surrounding medical surgical nurses.
We're proud MedSearch nurses just like you, sharing our stories, insights, and experiences to support you in your nursing journey. We welcome you to this episode, which happens to also be Neil's first episode as a co-host. Neil, can you tell us a little about yourself and your nursing journey?
My name is Neil Johnson. I'm currently a flex pool med-surg nurse for Moses Cone Hospital amongst their system. Prior to my nursing career, I was an elementary school teacher for approximately 12 years. I guess, as they say, you can't fight your DNA. My father was a nurse as well as his mother was a nurse. And so somewhere in my DNA, there was a calling to finally grab the stethoscope and engage in the world of nursing. And I look back at it and don't regret one moment. I started my career as a C.N.A. on an oncology floor, earned my LPN as well as my RN, and most recently had graduated in 2019 with my BSN. And I'm on the hunt for a school to do my master's in nurse education. So I guess teaching will never leave me. It's just enhancing the lives of future nurses to make sure I get good health care when I get to the age of retirement.
Great. It's using both of those gifts.
Yes. It's been a great journey, and I look forward to just more and more of the world of nursing changing every day through pandemic, through research, and being in such a great area of North Carolina. There's so many great hospitals, Duke, Wake Forest, that are always constantly just pushing the edge to the next level of modern medicine. What's new with you?
Well, personally, I just celebrated my 10-year wedding anniversary with my husband. So we are excited to take a little mini vacation this weekend. We're going to head down to Atlanta. We live in Texas right now, so we're going to be in Atlanta for this weekend. Professionally, I'm about 6 weeks into my new position as a nursing professional development practitioner. And I feel like I'm finally getting my legs under me, and I'm getting out and meeting nurses on the floor and helping to get to know this brand new system, because I left my hospital system for a brand new hospital system. So I'm having to learn their learning management system and all of their platforms that I've never used before. So it's been really exciting.
And definitely identify, after having been with one hospital system for 12 years and jumping ship to learn a whole new kind of environment. But like I said, systems used, platforms used, and just the way things kind of ebb and flow in a hospital of a different system. And congratulations on both accounts.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. Nursing is still the same. The nursing care is still evidence-based. We're still doing all the same nursing care, but they deliver it just slightly different. They document it differently. They keep track of everything differently. So it's been nice to see. Tell us what's going on with you these days.
Personally, I'm getting into doing a lot of home renovation. So I've tried to master the art of ceiling fan installation, which I was doing right prior to this. So I came up with a few glitches, but tend to figure it out. I'm trying to keep my dogs out there and active, my 2 pit bulls that keep me company. And professionally, I've been 6 months now back at the bedside with Moses Cone Hospital. And that's been a great experience, but trying to decide where to do my master's in nurse education. I'm kind of coming down to UNC Wilmington and Duke, which would kind of be a lifelong dream to be a Dookie. Yeah.
Yes, those are great choices.
Yes. So just kind of putting the applications and seeing where the chips may fall.
Good. That's great. All right. Well, why don't we move on to our topic? Today's topic is how to make my voice heard by management. Neil, you're a clinician and a former nurse manager. What are your thoughts?
When I think about how to make sure I have my voice heard by management, I actually refer back to my first principal, believe it or not, in education. And he always told me, Neil, if you come tell me your classroom you can't handle teaching those kids, you look incompetent. But if you come and approach it as, I don't see how this is beneficial to our students, it puts the student at the center. And I relay that to nursing in the sense that we're always told that we're supposed to be patient-oriented in what we do. And so I always think of, if I am to come to a manager, or if I had a nurse come to me, they say to me, like, I can't handle this patient load. Once again, the nurse doesn't look like they could do their job. But if I say, this puts our patient at risk for a fall, this puts our patient at a risk for a med error happening, that changes the perspective and truly puts the reason why we got into nursing really into focus. And it then really gives us a time to analyze and look at what can we do for the patient that will be better for them overall. So I find that if we want to hear the voice heard, we got to make it about safety and patients. And sometimes in certain situations, the safety of nurses too.
Absolutely. It also gives them a place to start talking. I think that definitely makes them stop and listen to what you have to say, but it opens the door for the conversation to try to come up with a solution. I know for me as a manager, one of the hardest things for me to respond to was somebody that would come into my office and just complaining. They needed to voice their frustrations, but if that's all they do, we're not going to fix the problem. So coming at it the way you just said, let's take it back to the real reason we're here, and it's patient safety. And what are we doing to protect our patients? We've put ourselves in a situation that's put our patients at risk, but let's talk about what we can do to change it.
Strangely enough, I refer back to my teaching career a bit, but the same principal always would tell me, come in with a solution.
Yes.
Don't come to me with a problem. Just come to me with the problem and possible solutions. I could hear them out and at least say, that sounds like something we could possibly do. I remember my first assistant nurse manager position was with a cardiac telemetry unit. And I'm going to refer to Tracy King. She was my first manager I worked under in a leader role. She's the one who encouraged me to actually become a member of the Academy of Medical Surgical Nursing. And every day at about 6:00, the floor was technically a card tele, which you're supposed to have an ACLS certified nurse take care of those patients, not just a BLS. And so we wouldn't always get the advanced cardiac life support nurses. So sometimes we'd have to transition 4 to 6 patients off of our unit to another unit. So talk about a problem, a huge problem. Imagine within an hour trying to transition 4 to 6 patients to another.
There's a lot
unit.
of room for error.
Yes. And of course, the 4 nurses and myself kind of were griping to a point. And then I thought, you know what? We have logs for everything else. So why don't we create a log that says, did their telemetry box go with them? Did their IV pole and stuff? Kept track of all the equipment, let alone their personal belongings. So basically, towards 6:00 in this process of the problem of being heard to not make our work so chaotic, so I don't have to hunt down telemetry boxes, we came up with the idea of creating a checklist, a ticket to go. So we would make sure about 5:30, 6:00, we knew those patients would move and we'd start getting all the stuff, put it in a little cart, have that little ticket to ride, and made what could be a problem a lot easier by having a check and balance system, make sure patients got everything they needed to go where they were going.
Absolutely. I like when those ideas come from the actual nursing staff, because I'm sure you know in management, sometimes there are decisions made about throughput processes or workflows, and there's not any input from the nurses at the bedside. So unless the nurses come to some of those meetings or join those committees and remind everybody what things are like for that nurse on the floor, they can change the workflow processes to make it easier and better for the nurses on the floor.
I always tried when I was in middle management to do some time on the floor so I can understand the day of the nurse still, because within the last 3 years, we know it's changed drastically, let alone the increase in comorbidities over the last 10 to 15 years. No more you get just a case of hypertension. There's, a whole cavalcade of problems that come with it: hypertension, diabetes, kidney failure, congestive heart failure. So we're dealing with a lot more complicated cases than we were just 5-6 years ago.
Absolutely. The other thing I think that can feed into this is getting nurses to recognize how powerful their voice actually is. And I would love for every single nurse to recognize how important it is, how much their presence is needed on some of those hospital-wide committees. I think a lot of people don't want to take the time to go to those committee meetings because sometimes you have to come up on a day off or you have to come up during your shift and find somebody to watch your patients. But that is a valuable voice. That's a valuable perspective that those committees need.
I thoroughly agree. I always say change tends to happen on the inside and not from some upper management position. It's a group of nurses that are on some kind of steering committee that will start discussing different ideas of how to make it safer for nurses, how to make it more efficient for nurses, different ideas like that. And it is hard to encourage people on their day off because we're so drained lately more than ever to start even the spark. A former coworker of mine, she had a great idea. The hospital less most recently, I think it's been going nationwide, where they're not just doing a once a year BLS skills. It's a every quarter. There's a skills check.
Right. The RQI.
Yeah, the RQI. Yeah, which is, a very interesting way to do it. And consistency is the way to make it common practice and to keep it fresh all the time. And she was even thinking of the idea on behavioral health to make sure we're keeping up on the practice of how to do restraints, how to do the documentation. Because even on those units, you're not always consistently doing those things on a day-to-day basis. So really to have a RQI on a behavioral health aspect, I think is a great idea. And so that's where, like I said, change comes on those little inside ideas, not some big grand CEO idea of how to make money and move people.
Right.
And so
right.
It's listening and not being afraid to speak up on a great idea, because you never know where it's going to go. Once again, I will always refer to Tracy King as one of my first managers that really groomed me for leadership. And she always says, the worst that they do is say no.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And I hope that more nurses can take that lesson to heart, because there is nothing wrong with sitting around with your coworkers or even talking to your manager or even your charge nurse about just a silly idea that might pop into your head that might change the way we do nursing. That's how changes happen. It can be an offhanded comment that makes somebody else go down another path in their head. And then all of a sudden we have a complete change in practice.
There's hope for the future with that, making nursing more personable, back to the days where we could actually take care of patients.
Yeah, and it makes total sense. I remember being in nursing school, and when people this was before they had emesis bags, we would have those emesis basins, which seemed like a great idea to catch emesis as it falls out. But when I got to a different facility and I saw those emesis bags, it made so much more sense. That was not a huge idea, but that made a great impact on nursing in general. And that came from a nurse just talking to somebody saying, I wish there was a better way to capture the emesis that comes out of these patients.
I tell you, starting at Moses Cone, two mind-blowing things that popped out to me. You mentioned the emesis basins / wash basins. We have them, but they're made out of somewhat that corrugated cardboard that a lot of times fruit is packaged in. Mm-hmm. So they're disposable, where they hold water greatly, but you're not reusing them and causing cross-contamination time after time. I thought that was just ingenious. A little backstory on Moses Cone in this North Carolina area. He did clothing, actually, and he was one of the main suppliers to the Levi's company for clothing and denim. And their linens are more breathable and help with wound healing is the aeration of it, which I thought was ingenious, something so simple to make such a deep impact on a patient. And they look a lot more comfortable, the sheets and blankets, I'm not going to lie. They're not quite the Egyptian count that we like at home.
Right.
But definitely better than you see in the average hospital.
Another thing I like seeing on units is those unit-based councils. If units make them more like a support system, it makes people want to come to those meetings. And if you are looking at your quality metrics, if you're looking at things from a suggestion box, any of those things that are happening on the unit, I think those councils are where those small changes can happen for the unit. So not only does it increase morale, but you also have the ear of your manager to talk about real things that are affecting the nurses on the floor. So changes like workflows.
A lot of times for those small changes to happen, it takes a lot of work on a lot of people's parts. Not only just the floor nurse to bring up those ideas, but the manager to present them to the director of nursing, the director of nursing to push it up to the, whether it's the chief nursing officer or the CEO, whoever it has to be to get that done. And sometimes it's hoping you have the support of those really higher ups, even above your manager, to really put the heart and soul of the patient at the center of it all, to know it's better for the patient.
And it can be scary, especially for newer nurses on the floor when they're not sure whether their voice matters or whether they have a good idea or not. I think it's important to surround themselves with a peer group, whether that is somebody on the unit or whether that is somebody in their personal life, to talk about it. They should not just sit by and watch things happen and be in a job that's miserable for them. I mean, you've got to have somebody to talk to about it. And out of those conversations, ideas can happen.
That's the beauty somewhat right now, honestly, in the world of nursing. You hear a lot of the baby boomers are starting to retire and there'll be a great increase, but guess what? A lot of those baby boomers are still nurses. And you have some young nurses still coming in. And so you have this great mix of the technology of the new nurses, but the heart and soul of the way nurses used to be trained. And so if you get those people talking and you get some teams going, I think there could generate a lot of great ideas to middle management and management of making better workflow for nurses and let alone for patients.
Newer nurses have a great perspective coming in. I can remember we were looking at a project to do for evidence-based practice, like an evidence-based practice project. And another nurse came to me and said that, I'm going to call her Sarah. She said, I think Sarah has a great idea, but she's afraid to bring it to you. She plays music for her patients, and it really does make a big difference. So is there any way that we could do something to help get more music to the patients? We wrote up an abstract and they did a little pilot project. So this was patients that were going to the OR. They were encouraged to create a playlist on their phones. Right. And while they were in surgery, the OR technicians would play that music for the patient in the background. So we knew what songs they liked. We knew what music was soothing to them, so they could be listening to it before they went under. And they were also listening to it when they came out of it. It was a great satisfier for the patients.
Yes, I don't have a lot of experience in the OR, but we all know an OR is almost like a DJ nightclub. It's surgeons having their playlists for all their surgeries, but music's such a great therapeutic intervention for anybody, let alone, I've been to surgery once or twice, and it is very nerve-wracking going in there. And so if you don't have a great nurse who's in tune and an empath to their patient's experience, they want better than a good playlist.
Exactly. And things like that, that was just a small thing that she recognized was helping her patient. And when you have a leadership or you have an organization that supports that, you can take it a little further than just you doing this good thing for your patient. You can spread that to your whole unit doing things for their patients and your whole hospital doing things for their patients. And that leads to things like these poster presentations, like at the AMSN convention. If you put together a project like that, you get together with an educator or with a statistician, you put together a poster project. It is not as hard and intimidating as it sounds. It starts with a simple question and a simple survey and small steps. And, you need maybe a little help with measuring your outcomes, but then it turns into a poster project. And then you can end up at a national convention, and it starts with just a simple conversation.
Well, not only that, but think about, you do that throughout each hospital, patient satisfaction goes up greatly. It's amazing what we'll remember from an experience. Thinking about that, I would still brag, even if surgery went kind of rough and I was hurting on the way, I'd be like, guess what? I got to play my playlist going into the OR. That would stick out of all things throughout the whole experience. Like, yeah, I was hurting and I had surgery, but people liked my playlist. Do you believe it? Music's a very personal thing for people.
And I also want to touch on, there have been times when sometimes management is not as supportive as they could be for various reasons. And Neil, you've been a manager. I've been a manager. We know that sometimes there are things you cannot do. You don't have the bandwidth to be as supportive as you can be or that you should be to your nurses. There are other ways around that. I mean, there is a chain of command. There are different committees that you can be on. I know at our facility, our leadership holds question and answer sessions. But a lot of times people don't want to take advantage of going to those question and answer sessions because it's so intimidating. But a lot of times these higher leaders do want to hear from your perspective. Like I said, they are looking at the hospital from their view in their C-suite. They're looking at numbers. They're looking at charts. They're looking at metrics. But when you can sit in front of them and talk about the patient you took care of last night and how staffing impacted you, how this new process is impacting you, if you can give them a real story with your face and the real actions from the patient's perspective, that's going to have a lot more impact on them. And that can be a way to make things happen.
Hearing it straight from the horse's mouth, as opposed to the chain email that gets sent through 3 different people, or your manager that brings the story twofold from the C.N.A. up or something like that.
Yeah.
When you hear the cringe in a voice, or, the tears in a voice, really bring a point up about what it was that was happening, and definitely make a huge difference.
Yeah. And the other thing is there is also safety in numbers. If you are talking to your peers and there's multiple people that are feeling the same pinch that you're feeling, if you go together to your manager. And if they still won't listen, then that's why there is a chain of command. If there is a true safety issue or something that is just not working and you want to be heard, you've got to get a louder voice. You've got to gather more support, and somebody somewhere down the line will listen. It takes a little bit of courage to speak out.
When you're in the front line of it, you're able to see things that management's not able to unless you have hands-on management. Like I said, our former manager, Tracy King, he was the one that was right there side by side pushing beds with us. Here's my manager pushing beds down the hall as opposed to calling transport.
That is a great leader. That is a great leader, someone who is willing to get down in the trenches with you.
You have to be blessed to have that leader. If not, it's hard for them to really see what's going on in the front line that just is oblivious to people who aren't in there. You know, how a patient is discharged, how the after visit summary is printed out and signed and everything. And some hospitals have these like ride share programs for people who aren't able to drive themselves home or have somebody pick them up. Use of smart technology. You have some patients who just don't know a whole lot about using a smartphone. They still have flip phones. I did have a patient though the other day, 92 years old. He had his iPhone out on it, you know, and I was just like, wow, that's pretty neat. And he knew what he was doing with it. You know, I think he even had a Facebook account.
That is a great point. I remember a long time ago when I think my son was in middle school. No, I think he was in elementary, and all of the kids got iPads. And I went to work and I was like, you know what? They're giving iPads to my children. Is there any way that we could start using iPads on the unit? And I think there was something in the works at that point. But a year later, all of the nurses on the floor had iPhones. Our communication system within the hospital went to an iPhone system. So we all had iPhones to communicate with each other. It was amazing. Technology really helped change the way we communicated with each other at that hospital.
You just hit on something that I need to be vocal about for my new position at my new system. My old place had a system called Volt, which used old iPhones, and it was great because you could look up anybody in the system, have a little star next to people's name, so-and-so in environmental services, so-and-so in food services, phlebotomy, etc. And I find that's one of the things I miss the most in my new work environment. Like you said, the hard thing about a new job is getting used to their systems. They don't have that in play. So you have the good old badge buddy you have to look on the back of and has all these random phone numbers on it.
Yeah, the whole point is med-surg nurses are on the front lines. They have a very important perspective that needs to be heard. A lot of hospitals are going for magnet status. And one of the big things about magnet status is that nurses are using their voice. So take the opportunities when they come. Join those committees. Don't be afraid to speak out in staff meetings. Even using something like an ethics line. If there's a safety concern and you're not being heard, those ethics lines exist there for you, and those can be done anonymously. But don't be afraid to use your voice.
That's for sure. And get certified. Get certified and get part of the account.
Absolutely.
It just adds a little bit of depth to your voice too, because they say, okay, this person not only has experience, but they're certified. They really know what they're talking about. You know, you used to do oncology. You said, you become certified to do chemo. On top of that, when you're sitting there giving chemo all the time, you're like, hey, wait, this is a problem. This is a situation for improvement. If I come to my manager and I say, here's a situation for improvement, it's a lot more positive aspect as opposed to saying, there's a problem here. Right there already gives you that I'm mad and upset. And
yes,
you're going to already get defensive on me. Hey, I see room for improvement in this area because we're setting us up for a safety issue.
Absolutely. I think that brings us full circle to what we were talking about at the beginning, and that is come with solutions. Don't come with problems.
That's for sure.
Okay, well, I think we are about out of time. Neil, that was your first episode. What are your thoughts?
Thought it was great. I love sharing my opinion, love giving ideas, love trying to educate or get educated in new topics and ideas. I look forward to many, many more future podcast episodes with the team here.
It was very nice meeting you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. And to everyone else, those of you listening on the front lines, please take away from this episode that your voice is important, that your voice has a place in your hospital. So do not be afraid to use it. There are many ways to speak out and improve nursing for yourself, for your peers, for your profession. We look forward to connecting with you on the next episode of MedSurg Moments, the AMSN podcast. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. Send us your questions, topic ideas, and feedback via our official MedSurg Moments email address, amsnpod@amsn.org. That's amsnpod@amsn.org.
I'd also like to remind you to become a member of AMSN or renew your membership at www.amsn.org. You receive lots of cool benefits and perks, such as discounted pricing on the annual convention and continuing education.
We encourage you to help us spread the word and subscribe to the MedSurg Moments podcast via your smartphone podcast app to receive notifications of future episodes. Please be sure to leave us a review and recommend MedSurg Moments wherever you get your podcasts to help us reach even more listeners.
I invite you to join the conversation by sharing your ideas and questions on AMSN's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter pages. And don't forget to add #MedSurgMoments to your posts. Simply enter AMSN in the search field on any of these social media platforms to connect with us.
The content within the MedSurg Moments podcast represents the views, thoughts, and opinions of the co-hosts and may not necessarily reflect the views, thoughts, and opinions of the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses. Until next time, I'm Laura.
And this is Neil. And as always, remember, MedSurg Moments is a moment in our lives, a moment in our MedSurg careers that make a huge difference.